November 12, 1942. The scorching western desert of North Africa. A lone American vehicle, a relic of a swift retreat, sat silent near a ravaged British supply convoy. Its previous occupants, having deemed their position untenable, had abandoned it. German military protocol usually dictated immediate destruction or simply leaving such finds behind. Yet the commander of a reconnaissance unit had a different vision. "Get our best mechanic," he ordered. "I want to know if we can use this thing." What the seasoned mechanics of the Afrika Korps uncovered in the next half hour would profoundly challenge their notions of German engineering supremacy. The realization wasn't a sudden flash, but a slow, dawning comprehension with each detailed inspection. A small dashboard plaque revealed its identity, Willys MB. The Americans, they learned, simply called it a Jeep. The first eye-opener came with the engine cover. The compartment was remarkably orderly, clearly designed for swift field maintenance by anyone with basic mechanical aptitude. Color-coded wiring, clearly labeled components, and easily accessible parts that didn't demand specialized tools. In 2 decades of servicing German military vehicles, the lead mechanic had never encountered such thoughtful engineering for battle zone repairs. Every bolt was standard. Every component appeared identical across its type, a testament to mass production and effortless replacement. The Go Devil engine, a 134 cubic inch unit producing 60 horsepower at 4,000 RPM, wasn't impressive by German standards, but its underlying design philosophy was revolutionary. This engine wasn't built for absolute perfection. It was built for simplicity, resilience, and above all, rapid production. A mechanic with minimal training could service it using basic tools, no unique wrenches, no intricate procedures demanding factory specialists. The Americans, it seemed, had crafted this vehicle with the understanding that farmers and factory workers would be its primary maintainers under the harsh realities of combat. By late 1942, the contrast between American and German military vehicle philosophies was stark. The United States would ultimately produce over 640,000 Jeeps during the war. Germany, by comparison, would manage just over 50,000 Kübelwagens. More concerning than the numbers was what this disparity represented. The Jeep was the embodiment of American manufacturing ingenuity, standardized, simplified, and designed for mass production by semi-skilled labor using interchangeable parts. As officers approached, awaiting the mechanic's verdict, the senior mechanic finally looked up. He chose his words carefully. "This vehicle is remarkable. It's designed by someone who truly understands field conditions." An officer, a frown creasing his brow, retorted, "German engineering is the finest in the world." The mechanic didn't argue. He simply gestured towards the 4-wheel drive system. "Observe this transfer case. A single lever engages 4-wheel drive. One lever. Our Kübelwagens require multiple operations, and most don't have 4-wheel drive at all." The Wehrmacht's primary light vehicle, the Volkswagen Type 82 Kübelwagen, was an excellent machine in many respects. Ferdinand Porsche had imbued it with typical German precision. It was lighter than the Jeep, more fuel-efficient, and its air-cooled engine cleverly bypassed the vulnerability of radiators to enemy fire. But it possessed a critical flaw. It was rear-wheel drive only. In the treacherous soft sands of North Africa, the mountainous terrain of Italy, or the unforgiving mud of Russia, this limitation proved devastating. The Jeep, conversely, could send power to all 4 wheels at will, a system so intuitive that an untrained soldier could master it in minutes. The mechanics continued their examination. Simple leaf springs provided suspension, crude compared to the Kübelwagen's sophisticated torsion bars, but infinitely easier to mend in the field. The electrical system was basic but robust. The fuel system could operate on virtually any grade of gasoline without modification. Most revealing was the weight distribution. The Jeep weighed approximately 2,450 pounds, a significant 910 pounds more than the Kübelwagen's 1,540. German engineers would have considered this excess weight a flaw, impacting performance and increasing fuel consumption. Yet, the mechanics recognized the underlying logic. That extra weight translated directly to durability. The frame was over-engineered, built to withstand abuse that would shatter lighter vehicles. The Americans had clearly prioritized reliability under duress over optimal efficiency. They had constructed a vehicle anticipating misuse, overloading, and conditions no engineer would endorse, yet engineered it to survive regardless. This was not the American incompetence that Wehrmacht propaganda had so often proclaimed. This was engineering firmly rooted in reality, not abstract theory. The unit brought the captured Jeep back to their forward position. Over the next 3 days, exhaustive tests commenced. They drove it through soft sands where Kübelwagens floundered. They overloaded it beyond its stated capacity. They subjected it to a level of abuse that would have crippled most vehicles. The Jeep absorbed it all. In soft terrain, where rear-wheel drive vehicles demanded careful handling and often got bogged down, the Jeep simply powered through. Its low-range gearing allowed it to crawl over obstacles at a walking pace, a capability the Kübelwagen's gearing couldn't match, despite its reduction hubs. Word of the Jeep's prowess spread throughout the Afrika Korps. The Americans, it seemed, possessed a vehicle that outmaneuvered the Wehrmacht's equivalent in nearly every meaningful aspect. Officers and mechanics from other units arrived to inspect it. The reactions were a predictable sequence: initial skepticism followed by grudging respect, then a profound dismay as the implications became chillingly clear. One supply officer, who had worked in German automotive plants before the war, spent an entire afternoon meticulously studying the vehicle. His assessment was blunt. This represents a fundamental difference in approach. We build vehicles to achieve engineering perfection. The Americans build them to be manufactured. In total war, that matters more. He elucidated what this difference truly meant to the assembled officers and NCOs. Observe this engine block. It's cast, not machined to fine tolerances. The Americans sacrifice a small amount of performance for massive gains in production speed. They can train a semi-skilled worker to assemble one of these engines in a fraction of the time it takes to build a German engine. Now, multiply that across every single component. He pointed to the stamped metal body panels. These panels are crude compared to ours, but they can be produced by the thousands in factories that previously made household appliances. The Americans have mobilized their entire economy. Every refrigerator factory, every washing machine plant, every commercial vehicle manufacturer, all converted to military production. We cannot match this capacity. The officers fell silent. He had articulated what many had already begun to suspect. Germany's philosophy focused on quality and precision made sense in peacetime. But in the crucible of total war, the American approach of adequate products delivered quickly was proving devastatingly effective. That same evening, a mechanic penned a detailed technical report. He documented every facet of the Jeep's design, highlighting both its strengths and weaknesses. This report, one of thousands generated by German technical intelligence, ascended the chain of command. Similar, increasingly troubling reports were inundating Wehrmacht headquarters from every front. German mechanics and engineers were encountering American vehicles and equipment with growing frequency, and their assessments were uniformly disquieting. The Americans were outproducing Germany by ratios that seemed impossible. In late 1942, Wehrmacht intelligence commissioned a comprehensive study of Allied vehicle production. The results confirmed their deepest fears. American factories were churning out military vehicles at a rate of thousands per day. Ford's sprawling Willow Run plant alone, at its peak, completed a B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than Germany's U-boats could sink them. The statistics painted a sobering picture. America's 1942 military vehicle production surpassed the combined total production of Germany, Italy, and Japan, and production was still accelerating. The captured Jeep became something of a legend within its unit. Soldiers vied for the opportunity to drive it. Officers utilized it for forward reconnaissance, trusting its reliability more than their own vehicles. When parts eventually wore out, replacements were scavenged from other captured Jeeps with alarming ease. Everything was interchangeable. By early 1943, the Afrika Korps had accumulated dozens of Jeeps. Wehrmacht mechanics formed informal networks, exchanging maintenance knowledge and scarce parts. A burgeoning black market for captured American vehicles and equipment emerged. A fully functional Jeep could command prices far exceeding its theoretical value, simply because everyone recognized its superior suitability for desert warfare. Then came May 13th, 1943. The Afrika Korps surrendered in Tunisia. Approximately 250,000 German and Italian soldiers became prisoners. Their war was over, but their education in American manufacturing prowess was just beginning. The stark contrast between German and American capabilities became undeniable during the journey to captivity. American trucks transported prisoners in quantities that would have necessitated horse-drawn wagons in the Wehrmacht. American Liberty ships, typically built in 5 to 6 weeks at their 1943 peak, compared to an initial 8 months, ferried thousands across the Atlantic. Every facet of the logistical operation demonstrated an organizational capacity that dwarfed anything Germany had achieved. At the prisoner processing center in Oran, Algeria, captured mechanics observed American motor pool sergeants servicing a fleet of vehicles with a casual efficiency that would have been unimaginable in the Wehrmacht. The motor pool housed dozens of jeeps, trucks, and command cars. Young American soldiers, many barely out of their teens, performed maintenance with speed and confidence. Tools were abundant and readily available. Parts were delivered without the usual requisition delays. Every vehicle utilized the same basic components, allowing mechanics to service any vehicle without needing specialized knowledge for each type. An American sergeant who spoke passable German noticed a captured mechanic intently observing. "You a mechanic?" he asked. "I was Afrika Korps vehicle maintenance." The German replied. The sergeant grinned. "Well, no war for you now. But I bet you got questions. Come on, I'll show you around. Not like you can steal anything anymore." What followed was an afternoon of profound learning. The sergeant guided him through the motor pool, explaining American maintenance philosophy with disarming honesty. "See, the thing is, we design everything so any farm boy can fix it. Most of our guys never saw a vehicle engine before basic training, so we make it simple. Color-coded wires, standard bolts, everything labeled. We got manuals written for 6th grade reading levels. The idea is that if something breaks, anyone can fix it without calling in a specialist." The captured mechanic examined a disassembled Jeep engine. Every component was clearly marked. The maintenance manual contained detailed illustrations and step-by-step instructions that could be followed by someone with minimal mechanical knowledge. "How many of these do you produce?" he inquired. The sergeant shrugged. "Hell, I don't know exact numbers, but thousands every week, I'd guess. They keep coming off the production lines faster than we can ship them out. We got so many Jeeps that if one breaks down, we usually just grab another one instead of fixing it immediately. Thousands every week." The number seemed impossible, yet the evidence was everywhere. This motor pool alone contained more vehicles than entire German divisions had possessed, and this was just one small American unit at a forward supply base. The sergeant continued the tour. Dodge trucks capable of hauling loads that would require 2 German vehicles. Half-track personnel carriers produced in quantities that made German equivalents seem like rarities. Tank transporters that could move armor without wearing out their tracks. The thing is, we learned from the last war, we build everything with common components. A bolt from a Jeep fits a truck, fits a half-track. Same with electrical parts, hydraulic systems, everything. Makes logistics simple. Instead of needing 1,000 different parts, we need maybe a couple hundred, and we produce them by the millions. This was the secret that German manufacturing had never fully grasped. Component commonality wasn't just about production efficiency. It was about creating a logistical ecosystem where any part could be used anywhere. Any mechanic could service any vehicle, and the entire system reinforced itself. The journey from North Africa to American prison camps continued this education. At every stop, prisoners witnessed American production capacity operating at a scale that defied German preconceptions. The port at Norfolk, Virginia, processed thousands of tons of supplies daily with mechanical efficiency. Cranes loaded and unloaded cargo at speeds that would have demanded armies of workers in Hamburg. Trains carried prisoners across America in passenger coaches that would have been considered luxury in Germany. And everywhere, there were vehicles. Cars filled parking lots outside factories. Trucks lined highways in convoys that stretched for miles. Military vehicles sat in depot yards by the thousands, awaiting shipment to combat zones. At Camp Hearn, Texas, skilled mechanics volunteered for the motor pool. American camp commanders welcomed their expertise, as the war effort demanded every available worker. For the next 2 years, German mechanics worked alongside American soldiers, maintaining the vehicles that kept the camp running. American mechanics approached vehicle maintenance with direct practicality. They weren't engineers striving for perfection. They were problem solvers focused on keeping equipment operational. When something broke, they fixed it quickly with whatever was available. When parts weren't available, they improvised. When a vehicle proved irreparable, they cannibalized it for components and requested a replacement, which typically arrived within days, not weeks. The captured mechanics observed American techniques closely. German mechanics were trained to maintain vehicles to factory specifications, requiring specialized tools and precise procedures. American mechanics were trained to keep things running by any means necessary. In peacetime conditions, German methods yielded superior results. In the chaos of wartime, American methods proved vastly more effective. The motor pool at Camp Hearn processed hundreds of vehicles monthly. Jeeps arrived for routine maintenance, received service in hours rather than days, and quickly returned to duty. This efficiency stemmed from parts abundance and component interchangeability. When a part needed replacement, the parts room had dozens in stock. When a tool was required, the tool room provided it immediately. When a vehicle was beyond repair, another one seamlessly took its place. One German mechanic befriended an American soldier who had worked for Ford before the war. The American proved knowledgeable about the automotive sector. Before the war, I worked on the assembly line at Willow Run. That's Ford's bomber plant outside Detroit, biggest factory in the world. We're building B-24 Liberators. Started production in '42, and by the time I got drafted last year, we were completing one bomber every hour. Every single hour, a complete 4-engine heavy bomber rolled off that line. The arithmetic was staggering. 24 bombers per day, over 700 per month. How is such production possible? The German asked. Mass production principles, the American explained. Mr. Ford figured out how to break down complex manufacturing into simple, repeatable steps. You don't need skilled craftsmen if every worker does one simple task repeatedly. A kid fresh off the farm can be trained in a week to install one type of bolt in one location. Do that with 1,000 workers and you get massive output. This was the fundamental difference. German production relied on skilled craftsmen building quality products in moderate quantities. American production relied on semi-skilled workers building adequate products in massive quantities. The American continued. Same thing with Jeeps. Willys Overland makes them, so does Ford. Both plants use identical specifications. A part from a Willys Jeep fits a Ford Jeep perfectly. They're completely interchangeable. That means if one plant gets bombed or has problems, the other keeps producing. Maintenance is simple because every mechanic learns one vehicle, not dozens of variants. The German mechanic pondered the Wehrmacht's vehicle inventory. Dozens of different truck types from different manufacturers, each with unique parts and maintenance requirements. Kübelwagens from Volkswagen, command cars from various sources, captured vehicles from across Europe, each demanding its own spare parts and knowledge base. German logistics were a nightmare of incompatible systems. American logistics were streamlined through uniformity. The real genius is that we designed for manufacturability from the start. When they put out the requirements for the Jeep back in '40, they gave companies just 75 days to produce a prototype. American Bantam did it in 49 days. Then Willys and Ford refined the design for mass production. Everything had to be simple to manufacture, simple to maintain, and simple to repair. The captured mechanics had examined enough Jeeps to recognize this truth. The vehicle wasn't elegant. German engineers would have designed something more sophisticated, but sophistication impeded mass production, and mass production was undeniably winning the war. By the summer of 1944, rumors of Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, reached the prisoners. When news of the landing's success arrived, many felt no surprise. The Allies possessed the manufacturing capacity to construct an invasion fleet that would have taken Germany years to assemble. News filtered into the camps through American newspapers and radio broadcasts. They read accounts of the Normandy beaches where Allied forces had landed with thousands of vehicles in the first wave alone. Jeeps, trucks, tanks, amphibious vehicles, all transported across the English Channel in purpose-built landing craft, themselves manufactured by the thousands. The scale of the operation defied comprehension. 6,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the initial assault. Within weeks, millions of Allied soldiers would be fighting in Europe, all supplied by a production base that created equipment faster than the Wehrmacht could destroy it. German prisoners reflected on their pre-war confidence in victory. That confidence had been rooted in assumptions about German technological superiority. Those assumptions proved incomplete. Germany did possess superior engineering in many areas. German tanks were more heavily armored and better armed than most American equivalents. German aircraft were often more sophisticated. German small arms were excellent. But none of that mattered when America could produce 5 tanks for every one Germany built, 10 trucks for every German truck, 100 Jeeps for every Kübelwagen. In the motor pool one afternoon, prisoners watched American soldiers loading Jeeps onto transport trucks for shipment to the port. A young private drove each Jeep up the loading ramps with casual confidence. Dozens of vehicles loaded in less than an hour, all bound for Europe to replace losses and supply new units. One German mechanic realized that this single loading operation at one camp in Texas represented more vehicles than his entire division had possessed in North Africa. This scene was being repeated at camps and depots across America every single day. The mathematics became inescapable. Germany had mobilized its economy for total war, stripping civilian production to support military manufacturing. Yet, German military vehicle production in 1943 totaled less than 100,000 units of all types. America, while maintaining a thriving civilian economy, produced over 2 million military vehicles in the same year. The disparity wasn't just quantitative, it was qualitative. American vehicles were designed for wartime realities: ease of maintenance, interchangeable parts, simple operation, and rugged reliability. German vehicles were engineered to specifications that made sense in peacetime, but proved impractical in sustained combat. In November 1944, news reached the camp of a German offensive in the Ardennes, what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's desperate last gamble in the West. The offensive relied heavily on capturing American fuel supplies because Germany no longer possessed sufficient fuel to sustain armored operations. More troubling were reports of Operation Greif, Otto Skorzeny's commando operation utilizing captured American equipment. German soldiers, dressed in American uniforms and equipped with captured jeeps and fake identification, were tasked with infiltrating Allied lines to sow confusion and seize bridges. If even Skorzeny, Hitler's favored commando who had famously rescued Mussolini, was reduced to depending on captured American vehicles because German vehicles were inadequate, it spoke volumes about the Wehrmacht's material situation. The operation failed. American military police quickly identified the German infiltrators through careful questioning about American culture and procedures. The Ardennes offensive itself ground to a halt, not primarily due to fierce American resistance, but because German forces simply ran out of fuel. Panzer divisions abandoned their tanks when fuel trucks failed to arrive. Infantry divisions resorted to horse-drawn transport because motorized logistics had collapsed. By January 1945, the German attack had been contained and reversed. Spring of 1945 brought news of Germany's impending collapse. The Red Army closed on Berlin from the east. American and British forces crossed the Rhine and drove deep into Germany from the west. In the camp motor pool, German mechanics continued their work, maintaining vehicles for the army that had defeated their homeland. They felt no satisfaction in their work, but no shame either. Germany had lost, not because its soldiers lacked courage or skill, but because it had challenged powers whose production capacity it could never match. One afternoon in April, an American soldier approached with news. Germany surrendered. War's over in Europe. The mechanics nodded. They had expected this for months. "What happens to us now?" one asked. "You'll go home eventually, probably not immediately, Lots of logistics to work out, but you'll go home. One mechanic considered this. Home to a Germany that had been bombed into rubble, occupied by foreign armies, its cities destroyed by the same manufacturing might that had produced the Jeep he had examined years ago. The American asked, "You're a smart guy? Did you really think Germany could win?" The top mechanic pondered his answer carefully. "Before the war, yes. We believed German quality would overcome American quantity. We had seen American products before the war, and many were inferior to German equivalents. We assumed American military equipment would be the same, but it wasn't. No. When we examined that first Jeep in '42, we realized we had made a fundamental error. We had confused peacetime quality with wartime effectiveness. Your Jeep wasn't better engineered than our Kübelwagen in absolute terms. It was better designed for mass production and field conditions. In total war, that proved decisive." The American nodded. "Yeah, we build adequate products quickly and in huge quantities." "Exactly." They stood in silence for a moment, two mechanics from opposing sides, united by a shared understanding of what had truly determined the war's outcome. The repatriation process began in late 1945. German prisoners boarded ships for the journey home. One mechanic arrived in Bremen in January 1946, processing through Allied control stations before being released. The city was ruins, rubble stretched in every direction. But amidst the destruction, he noticed something. American vehicles everywhere. Jeeps carrying Allied officers through the shattered streets. Trucks delivering relief supplies. Motor pools where German civilians worked alongside Allied soldiers. He approached one motor pool, introducing himself to the American captain in command. His English, honed during years of captivity, was serviceable. "Sir, I am a former Oberfeldwebel of the Afrika Korps, recently repatriated from Camp Hearn, Texas. I am a trained vehicle mechanic with experience maintaining American equipment. Are you hiring civilian workers?" The captain examined his identification papers. "Says here you worked in our motor pool in Texas. That right?" "Yes, sir. 2 years." The captain made a note. "We need mechanics desperately. Most German mechanics either died in the war or are still in POW camps. You can start tomorrow. Pay is an occupation script, redeemable for rations and necessities." And so the former Afrika Korps mechanic found himself employed by the army he had fought against, maintaining the very same vehicles he had once examined as enemy equipment. The Allies needed mechanics. He needed work. The war was over. Life continued. Over the following months, he witnessed the genesis of Germany's reconstruction. American aid poured in, distributed with the same efficiency that had won the war. Food, medicine, construction materials all arrived in American trucks, coordinated by American planners who approached Germany's rebuilding systematically. He worked in the motor pool, training young Germans in American maintenance techniques. Many of his students were former Wehrmacht soldiers like himself, men who needed civilian skills in a Germany that would no longer have a military. He taught them what he had observed: simplicity over sophistication, functionality over perfection, results over theory. These were lessons learned from American vehicles, lessons applicable to rebuilding German manufacturing. By 1947, he had been promoted to supervisor of the motor pool's German civilian staff. The American captain who commanded the facility treated him with respect, valuing his experience and organizational skills. One evening, the captain invited him to share a drink in his office. "I've been thinking about something. You've worked with both German and American vehicles extensively. If you were designing a vehicle for the new Germany, what would it look like?" He considered carefully. "I would adapt the American approach for European conditions. Smaller than a Jeep, more fuel efficient, but maintaining the same philosophy. Common parts, simple maintenance, designed for manufacturing rather than engineering awards. Europe has narrow roads and limited fuel, but we need the reliability of American design thinking." The captain nodded. "That's smart. Marshall Plan money will rebuild German manufacturing, and German engineers are already studying American methods. The future is American-style mass production, adapted for local conditions." This proved prophetic. In the decades that followed, West German manufacturing adopted American production philosophy while meticulously maintaining German attention to quality. The result was an economic renaissance that transformed Germany from a devastated nation into an industrial powerhouse. Companies like Volkswagen, which had produced the Kübelwagen during the war, evolved into global automotive giants by combining German engineering precision with American mass production techniques. The Volkswagen Beetle, which became one of history's best-selling automobiles, embodied this synthesis. It was simple, reliable, manufacturable in huge quantities, and affordable for average families. Former Wehrmacht mechanics who had worked in American prison camp motor pools returned to Germany with invaluable knowledge. They understood component standardization. They had witnessed efficient parts distribution systems. They had seen how simplified maintenance procedures increased vehicle availability. They had observed how designing for manufacturability, rather than perfection, enabled mass production. These insights, gained through years of maintaining American equipment, profoundly influenced German automotive design for decades. The German manufacturers that emerged from the ruins didn't try to recreate pre-war approaches. Instead, they synthesized German precision with American production efficiency. By the early 1950s, this hybrid approach was yielding remarkable results. Volkswagen production ramped up from thousands of vehicles annually to hundreds of thousands. Mercedes-Benz adapted assembly line techniques while maintaining its legendary quality standards. BMW restructured its manufacturing to emphasize component commonality across model lines. The economic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s owed much to these fundamental changes. West Germany became an export powerhouse, selling vehicles globally that combined reliability with affordability. The synthesis of German and American approaches created products that neither nation's pre-war philosophy could have produced alone. U.S. Army historian Hugh M. Cole, who interviewed Wehrmacht generals after their surrender, documented their perspective. Cole reported that German military leaders admired the Jeep more than anything else in the formidable American arsenal. Not the B-17 bombers, not the Sherman tanks, not the artillery, but the simple Jeep. This was because it represented the manufacturing philosophy that had actually won the war. General George C. Marshall himself called the Jeep America's greatest contribution to modern warfare. This wasn't hyperbole. The Jeep embodied principles that transformed not just military logistics but post-war global manufacturing: standardization, simplification, design for production, and an emphasis on reliability over sophisticated complexity. By November 1943, the U.S. Army had enough data on captured Kübelwagens to publish Technical Manual TME 983, a comprehensive guide to operating and maintaining German vehicles. The manual was famously published on June 6, 1944, D-Day, enabling American forces landing in France to utilize any Kübelwagen they captured. The Wehrmacht, strikingly, never published an equivalent manual for the Jeep, despite capturing thousands. They didn't need to. The Jeep was intuitive enough that any mechanic could figure it out. This contrast vividly illustrated the fundamental difference in design philosophy. The Kübelwagen required a detailed manual, translated into English, for American mechanics to understand its sophisticated systems. The Jeep, by contrast, required no manual at all for German mechanics to operate and maintain it effectively. The reunions began in the 1960s. Former members of the Africa Corps who had been captured in Tunisia gathered to remember fallen comrades. At one such gathering in 1967, an impromptu discussion arose about the vehicles of the war. One former mechanic offered his perspective. The Kübelwagen was better engineered in many respects. Lighter, more fuel-efficient, excellent for desert conditions where its air-cooled engine offered advantages. But the Jeep was better designed for modern war. Four-wheel drive, simpler maintenance, common parts, and most importantly, producible in quantities we could never match. An old officer who had commanded a reconnaissance unit nodded. I remember capturing my first Jeep in '41. We thought it was crude compared to our vehicles. Took us months to realize that simplicity was actually elegant efficiency. By '43, every unit wanted captured Jeeps because they worked better under combat conditions. Another veteran added, "The worst moment for me was realizing that America was producing more Jeeps in a week than Germany produced Kübelwagens in a year. That's when I knew we would lose, not from any particular battle, but from simple mathematics. They could replace losses faster than we could inflict them." This was the consensus that emerged from such discussions. German soldiers had tremendous respect for the Kübelwagen as a vehicle, but they recognized that the Jeep and what it represented about American production capacity had been decisive, not through combat effectiveness alone, though it was effective, but through what it revealed about the disparity in manufacturing capability between the combatants. The Wehrmacht's logistical situation had been dire throughout the war. By 1943, approximately 80% of German divisions relied on horse-drawn transport. The German army entered World War II with 514,000 horses and would eventually employ 2.75 million horses and mules during the war, with approximately 1.1 million horses in service at any given time. Over 2 million of these animals died during the conflict. In stark contrast, American divisions were completely motorized. Every American unit relied on trucks, not horses, for logistics. This created operational advantages that Wehrmacht commanders envied. American supply columns could move hundreds of kilometers in a day. German supply columns, limited by the walking speed of horses, averaged perhaps 30 kilometers daily in good conditions. When Wehrmacht generals examined the reasons for their defeat, they consistently pointed to material disparity rather than tactical or strategic failures. German soldiers fought with skill and courage. German officers made reasonable tactical decisions. But German industry simply couldn't produce enough equipment to sustain operations against enemies with overwhelming material superiority. The Jeep became the potent symbol of this disparity because every German soldier who encountered one understood what it represented. Here was a vehicle so abundant that Americans treated it as almost disposable, so reliable that it required minimal maintenance, so simple that any soldier could operate and repair it, so effective that German units preferentially used captured Jeeps over their own vehicles whenever possible. In 1976, the United States Army began replacing the Jeep with the WWII. The Jeep had served for 35 years, an extraordinary lifespan for any military vehicle. Many remained in service with reserve units and Allied militaries for decades more. That same year, Volkswagen celebrated the 1 millionth VW Golf produced. The Golf, like the Beetle before it, embodied lessons from both German and American approaches. Precision engineering combined with mass production efficiency, the synthesis that had rebuilt Germany. By the 1980s, West Germany had become one of the world's leading economies. German automotive companies exported millions of vehicles annually. German manufacturing was synonymous with quality and reliability, but that quality was now paired with efficient production methods, owing much to American influence. The final Africa Corps reunion took place in 1998. Fewer than 24 veterans attended, all in their 70s or 80s, survivors of a conflict that had ended more than half a century earlier. During the reunion, someone mentioned that a local museum had acquired a restored Willys Jeep. Most wanted to visit. They stood around the vehicle, these elderly men who had once been young soldiers in Africa, examining it with the eyes of mechanics and warriors who had come to respect it. One veteran reached out to touch the hood, his arthritic fingers tracing the familiar lines. I captured one of these in '42, used it for 3 months before I got wounded at El Alamein. Best vehicle I ever drove, better than anything we had. Another nodded. I examined one in Tunisia just before we surrendered. Couldn't believe how simple the design was. Realized then that we'd been approaching vehicle design all wrong. Too complicated. Too difficult to produce and maintain. They made over 600,000 of them, a third veteran added. We made 50,000 Kübelwagens. That ratio told you everything. They stood in silence for a moment. The Jeep sat before them, a museum piece now, its war long over. But for these veterans, it represented something more than a historical artifact. It was a symbol of the production capacity that had defeated them, the functional engineering that had proven effective, the abundance that had overwhelmed scarcity. We never had vehicles like this, one finally said. Not in the numbers, not with the reliability, not designed with the same philosophy. We built for perfection. They built for production. This was the profound lesson that Wehrmacht mechanics had absorbed examining captured Jeeps in the deserts of North Africa, in the mountains of Italy, in the fields of France. It was a lesson that shaped post-war Germany and influenced global development. The Jeep had been more than a vehicle. It had been an education. Wehrmacht mechanics, humbled by defeat, had proven to be excellent students. They studied not just how to maintain American equipment, but why that equipment had been designed as it was, and what those design choices revealed about the manufacturing philosophy that had ultimately won the war. That knowledge, painful in its acquisition, became the foundation for Germany's reconstruction and eventual prosperity. Defeat taught humility. American equipment taught functional engineering. The combination produced a new German philosophy that served the nation far better than pre-war hubris. The story of Wehrmacht mechanics and the Jeep is a compelling narrative of learning through defeat. Pride had told them that German engineering was superior, that quality would triumph over quantity, that sophistication would overcome simplicity. Reality taught them otherwise. American vehicles were not necessarily better engineered than German equivalents in most technical specifications, but they were better designed for modern warfare's realities. Producible in massive quantities, maintainable by minimally trained personnel, built with common, interchangeable parts, and reliable under abuse. This functionality, multiplied by American manufacturing capacity, created an overwhelming material superiority that no amount of German skill or courage could overcome. The Wehrmacht had excellent soldiers, capable officers, and sophisticated equipment, but it lacked the industrial foundation necessary to sustain total war against enemies who could produce equipment faster than Germany could destroy it. The mechanics who maintained both German and American vehicles understood this through direct experience. They had seen both systems operate. They had worked with vehicles designed according to fundamentally different philosophies. They knew which approach worked better under combat conditions. That knowledge informed their work rebuilding Germany. When they trained young mechanics, they emphasized lessons learned the hard way. When they consulted on industrial processes, they advocated for standardization and simplification. When they designed new products, they prioritized manufacturability and reliability. The engineers who rebuilt the German automotive and machinery sectors had studied captured American equipment, worked in prison camp motor pools, and observed American manufacturing methods. They created a hybrid, German precision combined with American production efficiency. That hybrid proved extraordinarily successful. By the 1970s, West Germany had become a leading exporter of manufactured goods. The economic success validated the lessons learned from defeat. Germany had abandoned the hubris that contributed to catastrophe and adopted a more effective approach, informed by the study of the victor's methods. The Jeep played a profoundly meaningful role in that transformation. Through direct experience, every Wehrmacht mechanic who maintained a captured Jeep absorbed insights about American philosophy. Every officer who rode in a captured Jeep recognized its advantages. Every soldier who witnessed the sheer abundance of Allied vehicles understood what propaganda had tried so hard to conceal. These experiences, shared by hundreds of thousands of German soldiers and prisoners, created a widespread understanding that Germany's defeat was not primarily military, but material. This understanding shaped attitudes toward reconstruction. German leaders and engineers looked to adapt American methods rather than merely restore pre-war practices that had proven inadequate. They embraced mass manufacturing rather than emphasizing small-scale craft production. They designed for manufacturability and reliability rather than perfection, regardless of production difficulty. The Wehrmacht mechanics, who first encountered Jeeps in the North African deserts, could not have imagined the long-term influence of that encounter. They were simply trying to understand an enemy vehicle, assess its capabilities, and determine whether it could be used by their own forces. In doing so, they inadvertently discovered profound truths about manufacturing capacity and engineering philosophy that would shape the rest of their lives and profoundly influence their nation's reconstruction. The last of those mechanics have now passed away. Their direct testimony is lost to history, but the lessons they learned remain embedded in industrial practices worldwide. Every vehicle designed for ease of manufacture owes something to the philosophy the Jeep embodied. Every standardized part reflects American influence on global standards. Every emphasis on reliability echoes lessons from motor pools where Wehrmacht mechanics meticulously maintained captured American equipment. This is the Jeep's enduring legacy, a teacher of principles that transformed manufacturing. It taught that assumptions about superiority require rigorous examination, that functional effectiveness matters more than sophisticated design, that designing for manufacture and maintenance serves a nation better than designing for theoretical perfection. Those lessons helped transform Germany from a defeated enemy to a prosperous ally. The mechanics who admitted they had never had vehicles like this became the quiet architects of renewal. Their humility, born from defeat and educated by observation, served Germany better than the pride that preceded catastrophe. In November 1942, examining a captured Jeep in the North African desert, Wehrmacht mechanics began a journey of discovery that would influence a generation. The mechanics who drove captured Jeeps admitted they had never had vehicles like it. That admission marked the beginning of a profound wisdom that ultimately rebuilt a nation.